Hi, everybody. My name is Joan, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am sitting here on unceded land of the Namkeg. And it may also be the Pawtucket, and before that, oh, actually, I don't know if it was before or after, the Massachusetts tribe. Now we call this land Beverly. It's on the North Shore of Boston. And we are currently in a heat wave. Maybe you've heard about this. And it's been going on for several days now, and it's really beginning to have kind of a cumulative impact. So I'm a little bit concerned about people. But right now, I have to tell you guys, I feel like I'm doing some kind of Zen sleepover with you tonight because here it's really late. And Liēn, I haven't done this since Yaza, and I was so bad at Yaza. Do you guys know what Yaza is? It's like late night sitting. Here it's like almost 11 o'clock on a Monday night. Normally I would be in bed sound asleep, and I have to tell you, it's kind of exciting. I'm looking out my window right here. So I just turned the fan off because it's been sweltering all day, and I don't have air conditioning, and that's fine. It's an old New England house, and so it sort of retains the heat, you know? But right now, this open window, there's this beautiful breeze coming through, and I can just make out the dark shapes of the deciduous trees out there. So it's really cool. Because usually when I'm sitting and it looks like that out there, it's in the winter. We sit at 6 a.m. And so in the winter, it's still dark at that hour, but I definitely do not have the window open at that, during that time. So it's really cool to be sitting at night with you and to warm up this Zoom sphere. I feel it. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves and sharing with me present. There's such a nice warm feeling in this sangha. And you're all very funny. So let's see, Liēn, I think I'll talk for like a little bit, and then we want to make sure we have questions, and you want to end by like 8:30. Is that correct? Yeah. And then, okay, great. So yeah, I wanted to just situate myself for you where I am, physically located and what I'm dealing with, the heat wave, the time zone, a bit of in an altered state here physically. But I also want to share with you what I'm bringing in tonight. I got transported a little bit hearing from you for the last few minutes. And so now when I return to myself, there are a few things that I feel like I'm really carrying tonight that I would just like to let you know about. I hear, the meowing of this cat bringing comfort to you, Myodo. How beautiful that is. Yeah. And, there was an experience over the weekend I had, Liēn. I know the Gen X Buddhist Teachers Conference. I think you've been involved in that. Well, this was my first time participating in it on Saturday, and it was by Zoom, and it was really powerful. Kriti spoke, and she, I don't know, do people know Kriti? Anybody know of her? Okay, so she is a climate scientist. She works for the Environmental Defense Fund. She's also a Zen priest in the Rinzai tradition. She's, I don't know if she was born in India, but she is very closely connected with India. She has lots of family there. And she shared with us how many people in her life have died recently in India, and the massive hit that they're taking right now from the pandemic. And Lien, I was just so moved by her the way she spoke, coming from absolute vulnerability. And by the way, I know I'm supposed to be talking about Be the Refuge, and I really think I'm going to get to that because Chensing's work, I mean, it's changed my life. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to touch on that tonight, but I want you to know how much I appreciate it. I read it cover to cover. And I just think she and others of Asian descent are really changing the conversation right now around Buddhism in America, I guess I would say. But back to Kriti and this speaking from this vulnerability, you know, all the loss, the death in her life right now. She talked about how we are all experiencing trauma, all of us to some degree. And for some of us, it's layers upon layers of trauma. She started out by talking about the statistics of how many children experience physical abuse or abuse of some kind, physical, sexual, in their household. How many have witnessed a parent be abused by a spouse. And so that's a layer of trauma. And then around racial considerations, the race-based trauma, the trauma around being a person of color in this country, that kind of trauma. And then there is the trauma of the fact of, you know, different people call it different things, climate collapse. The climate crisis. Climate change just feels way off the mark at this point. And so she is asking us to find ways within our sanghas to create strong containers. And I have a feeling yours already exists in this sangha for holding our grief. So I'm feeling that tonight. I am also feeling on Monday nights in our practice place, it's the best attended event of our practice week. It's the official racial justice sessions that we have. I mean, I feel like the work of racial justice is throughout the week, throughout the schedule, but we make it explicit on Monday nights, and it's the most attended. It's BIPOC led. It's pretty much Black people, African American, and also people from Africa. There's a woman from Kenya, a woman from Senegal, there's a man from Jamaica, there's a woman from Venezuela, and then 3 African American people. And I'm just coming out of this. We had the guest speakers tonight were 2 women of color, 2 African American women running for city council in Liēn, which is a neighboring town. I don't know if anybody there knows the North Shore of Boston. And there was so much energy on that Zoom, so much energy on the screen. And we're a 501c3, just like I think you are, Liēn. So we have to be careful about this. This is not about endorsing candidates, but it is endorsing the democratic process, which is fragile, as we're seeing in this country. And also, you know, creating space, forging space for the voices of people of color to not just be heard, but to lead, to find ways to make that happen. So I'm feeling the energy from that. And then, and one of the candidates, they're both women, African-American women. One of them said, "We need some serious shaking it up." And I was, the other day, I was at someone's house and they had one of those little snow globes. You know how people say that that's like the metaphor for Zazen. you shake it up, and there's a Buddha sitting inside this snow globe, and you shake it up, and it was actually kind of fabulous. It was gold snow, so it was like raining gold on the Buddha. And I looked at that and I was like, you know what? That's way too tidy. The kind of shaking up we need is a lot more massive than that. It's not so contained like that. But then back to this conference, this Gen X conference, that one of the primary topics of discussion was emerging Buddhisms, plural Buddhisms, and how there's a shakeup here happening. And I am feeling that tonight. I am feeling this, how we are bringing forth the Dharma within practice centers right now. I'll just talk about this country. It's happening in other countries, I think, but in this country, the vertical and the horizontal, the teacher-student relationship, the fact that, as Chensing brought forth in her book, this misapprehension, this co-opting of the Dharma by white people, and I'm one of them. This view of Zen centers, Buddhist centers, American Buddhist centers, and then ethnic Buddhist centers. And so all of this is part of what I'm feeling in my personal life, my practice life, and in our sangha, and I think wider, like this tectonic shift I feel is happening. Also, more immediately, I want to share with you, what I just confessed to about me being one of the white people co-opting this ancient tradition, and the work that's happening in our practice place right now, being led by people of color. It's for anybody who identifies here as a white person, I think the most important attribute that I'm feeling is humility. And I gave a talk a couple weeks ago at the Branching Streams conference, Liēn. I think I talked to you a little bit about this. And then at an SCBA event, and my angle was, it's mostly white people. And I said, okay, my fellow and sister white people, let's get really good. Let's get really comfortable. If we're committed to racial justice work, let's get really comfortable with failure, with being wrong as white people, with making mistakes. And I don't know, Liēn, I don't know if you heard anything about it. It felt like it went over like a lead balloon. And so I'm feeling all of this, and I'm feeling, so what I do, because I know part of this is supposed to be a Dharma talk, but I really want you to know a big part of what's going on with me right now is confusion, tenderness, not really knowing, fear, like feeling pulled in a lot of different directions right now. Like we're starting to talk about whether or not we establish a 501c4 so we can actively endorse people of color, women of color in particular, running for office. And then would that still be Zen? So this question that's being brought up with the Gen X teachers right now is, what is the most important part of these ancient practices, this tradition we call Buddhism, that we do not want to lose? And what can we really let go of? What no longer serves us? So this is the inquiry that I'm having tonight. And so when I'm reading this book, in preparation for what I wanted to share tonight, this is what I'm thinking about. Chensing herself, has she visited yet, Liēn? Okay, she's coming soon. She's fantastic, and one of the things, I just want to share some impressions I have of her as a human being and how she approached researching and writing this book and then sharing it with the world. She had tea with so many people. She baked cookies for so many people, and they sat together at her kitchen table and had conversations. And they traveled up and down the West Coast to visit each other. And then when we had a meeting before she visited our sangha. She visited us in, I think it was February. And we had a meeting before she came, and I noticed that as we were taught, she was asking me questions and she was taking notes, detailed notes as to what I was saying, but she kept eye contact with me as she was taking these notes. There is something so humanizing about this approach that shockingly is so different from what I've experienced, generally speaking, in what I'm going to call status quo Buddhism that I've been exposed to in my life, in my practice life. And, you know, so when I feel this, like this feels important. It feels important to admit to. It's like what I said to you at the beginning about truth telling. I really do feel this, that shikantaza, the practice of sitting zazen, is a practice, an ongoing practice of awakening. When we chant the three treasures, you know, the triple treasure of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the way I talk about this with people in our sangha, because there are people who come who don't identify as Buddhist, that this is, the triple treasure is awakening to reality or the truth with each other. And so this is ongoing. There's really no problem. You know, there is no failure. Ultimately, there are definitely missteps and transgressions, and we have practices like confession and repentance, which we do every day when we return to the cushion. And we also do every single time we give each other the chance to return to the relationship. So I had a weekend where there is a woman, part of the BIPOC leadership here. She's come on staff, and she and I have been working very closely. And I've already disappointed her a few times. And each time I've noticed, oh, what's going to happen now? Is she going to take off? You know, what's going to happen? And, you know, Friday, we had a very difficult encounter. Friday night, I felt like an idiot. I felt like an asshole. I felt like a bad person. I felt like, what am I doing? You know, and there's a saying, there's a text, Ancestor Dongshan. I don't know if you chant the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. Do you chant that, Lien? Okay. So the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi is a text from one of the ancient Chan teachers in our lineage, Dongshan, Ancestor Dongshan. And the way I understand it, it's basically, the first lines are, the teaching of thusness, the teaching of thusness is intimately communicated by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, so keep it well. The teaching of thusness, what is that? What is the teaching of thusness? The teaching of just this. The teaching of just this moment, whatever it is that's arising. I'm a loser. I'm an asshole. Oh, she didn't take off. Oh, we got to have a conversation this weekend. Oh, I got to spend the whole weekend, you know, I kind of say in my dramatic Mediterranean way, in the fetal position, you know, just kind of like just feeling the pain. And as a white person, and I would say that that is maybe the most important thing, is just to be with my pain, just as Kriti is saying, to find ways to open to my grief, because it touched all kinds of things in my own personal woundedness. So, so the line that I wanted to share in this text is, embrace the territory and treasure the road. Respecting this is fortunate, do not neglect it. It means, just like Dogen would say, enjoy your life, enjoy your awakening, every single precious moment of it. And so let me see here, 11:09 my time. That means 8:09 your time. And I do want to make sure we have time to, you know, engage. If you have any questions or anything that you would like to share. Chensing laughed at me. It was so funny because one of the questions I wanted to ask her, and I told her ahead of time when she came to visit, was, it is the very last paragraph. She's got, if you've read it, she's got all these appendices. There's like, I mean, it's such a great book. There's like appendix 5 is the last appendix. And this is just before the notes, the very last paragraph before the notes. If you have the book in front of you and you want to open it and read it with me, it's page 284. It's the very last paragraph, and I'm going to just read this. Chensing says, over the course of getting to know this remarkably diverse group of 89 interviewees, I have come to understand that this book, as a collective project of thinking into being young adult Asian American Buddhists, the double entendre behind thinking into being is deliberate. There is thinking into, in the sense of thinking about. There is also thinking into being, the process of thinking as an act of creation. Young adult Asian American Buddhist is in many ways a nebulous category. The category of young adult Asian American Buddhists is in many ways a nebulous category, but that need not be a liability. The difficulty of defining us is itself a powerful catalyst for creativity and connection. There's something about that that hit me so viscerally, you know, of what do we view as a problem? What do we view as too complicated, or, you know, and I remember feeling, because I've balked at categories, but there is something about holding subtlety and complexity with a kind of spirit, which is our spirit of shikantaza, I think. It's like Larry Ward, Dr. Larry Ward, one of my favorite quotes in his book is, hold on to nothing and yet embrace everything. Hold on to nothing, you know, and yet embrace everything. So these categories, they can be provisional, you know, as a means for being able to look more deeply, but we don't need to stay stuck there. But there still is a way in which to honor whatever that particularity is in that provisional category. And so when Chensing says this, the difficulty of defining us is itself a powerful catalyst for creativity and connection. I felt this with this staff person I was just referencing this weekend, of, you know, there was a part of me that didn't know what was going on in that difficult conversation on Friday. I just knew it was difficult. And I knew I wasn't feeling strong and clear. But it ended up being, because this word forging gold there's fire there. It's not a comfortable process. So a catalyst for creativity and connection, because like embracing the territory of that difficult conversation and then the very uncomfortable weekend that I had, I could hang out in the difficulty of it, you know, and see my confusion as a problem. There is a way in which, with her help and with her, you know, we've said we have just enough traction that there's something to return to. She and I, and it was her idea a couple of months ago, took a trip to DC. She's a self-proclaimed introvert, but she said, and you know, here we are in this pandemic, and she told me that she doesn't like crowds. But when I told her that I was going to be attending a mass march on Washington, that was an immigrant-led action by a group called Cosecha. I don't know if anybody here knows Cosecha, where thousands of people were expected. This woman said to me, I want to come. And so there we were in a car driving down to DC from Boston together. It took like 11 or 12 hours to get there. And then we shared a space, slept 2 nights there, did this march together, and then drove back. And that we just talked and bonded. And I spoke with her father in Senegal, and she told him all about me and told me all about him. And that was what we returned to. What's today? Monday, this morning, when we reconnected. So when Chensing says this difficulty of defining us is itself a powerful catalyst for creativity and connection, neither of us really knew what happened on Friday. But there's a sense now that with some bonding, you know, some sense of shared experience, some sense of connection, we're going to create, you know, because what the work is at hand is finding a way to engage with a seemingly intractable problem, like racism, like the unrelenting nature of white supremacy. How are we gonna extricate ourselves from this? How are we gonna move through this? How are we gonna forge something on the other side of white supremacy? It's gonna take some creativity and it's gonna take some courage. And I think it comes from this forging of some kind of truth that is not intellectual. I know I have to stop in a minute. The section that I was supposed to share with you, gaps, I did have all this stuff written, but maybe there's just one little thing I will share with you because it's connected with what I just said. It's in the section where they're talking about home altars, and they're talking about young Asian American Buddhists not really knowing how to set up an altar, or a home shrine. And this one person said that they even went out and bought a butsudan at a BCA church fundraiser and then had no idea how to set it up. But the thing that really hit me was the person who said, I always worry that I'll do something wrong, that I'll set up the altar wrong. And I think that hit me so powerfully because that was the feeling that I had over the weekend was, I did something wrong. Yeah, just like that, exactly, Case. And then I proceeded to hold my breath all weekend. And then at a certain point, it was like, exhale, Joan, you know, set up your altar, give it love, give it meaning. You know, you can bet the Buddha did not have a statue of the Buddha on his altar. You know, what is meaningful to you? just having a sacred space, having a place in your home that's not utilitarian, where you don't lean on, where you're upright, and where you can put your love and own that. That for me is the spirit when Dongshan says, embrace the territory and treasure the road. And I feel that this is through and through the work. And I just appreciate so much Chensing's offering with this book, and Liēn, I feel it with you and the way you're leading your sangha, of just always returning to the heart, which is always returning to the relationship with ourselves, and then therefore the relationship with each other. All right, let me just stop right there. I had a story that I wanted to tell you about Esther, the Kenyan woman who has great stories that are allegorical, but maybe that will be another day. I hope that we'll get to see each other again. But for now, anybody have a thought? Anything that you'd like to ask? Anything that you'd like to share? Anything coming up for you? I have a question for you. Another way of talking about what I've shared is for each one of us to take our place in the sacred, to know that we belong in the sacred. And you might ask, what is the sacred? You might ask, what is not sacred? If you have a sense of sacredness, is there anything holding you back from taking your place fully right there within it? That's what you get for not asking me a question. Let me just say, I love it. If anyone's having something arise and it might come out as a bleh, great, that's perfect. Any unformed or half-formed response that you might investigate a little bit in this shared space, this shared sacred space. Yes, Keiryū. Hi.
Thank you. I remembered a quote from a comedian after the Atlanta massacre, reflecting on a common Asian American, sense that I think about. I'm always thinking about everyone else when no one else is thinking about me, and I've more recently wondered, how do we talk about racism without talking about whiteness? Like, because there was a time in my life when I didn't think about race, and I was living whiteness without talking about it, and also not talking about other race experiences. And thinking about religion, I've noticed that lately, when I find myself surrounded by white people talking about Christianity or about Judaism, I just get really bored and I stop participating. And that's new for me. There's my half-formed response. Thank you.
Thank you, Keiryū. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Let me just see, quick response, because maybe that'll bring, someone else might want to bring something up. As you were starting to talk, about whiteness, it's so interesting. In the last year, personally, I've moved from talking about racism to talking about racial justice to talking about racial equity, and now to just naming the damn thing as white supremacy at the root of all of this. And for me, I am always talking about disrupting the status quo, which is why it's difficult, to sometimes have these conversations with larger groups like the branching streams. However, disrupting the status quo is our practice. That's what we're doing in Zazen. We're disrupting the status quo of our own minds, of that which is, I think, why, again, that last line that Chensing says, the difficulty of defining us is itself a powerful catalyst for creativity and connection. That's disrupting a status quo, the status quo of difficulty in defining. So it's in this amorphous state, meaning, we're never going to get anywhere. But Keiryū, what you just did is an example of, in this unformed thought, just putting it out there, and then things start to move. So disrupting the status quo is disrupting inertia. Because the natural way when we're sitting in shikantaza is, even though we're sitting in stillness, the natural way is movement. Everything is moving. Nothing is actually still. So what we're really talking about is sitting in non-distraction so as to enjoy, I might even say, that movement of that cosmic movement, the movement of aliveness, the movement of wonder, the movement of just life. And for me, right now in this moment, what's firing up is white supremacy is the opposite of that. White supremacy is control, stuckness. I keep seeing like, it is kind of movement, and eddy is a movement, but it's a stuck kind of movement that just circles endlessly and goes nowhere. It doesn't allow, it's stagnant. It doesn't allow for flow. It's unhealthy. So I think about this a lot, and especially now what I shared with you about the fear of being pulled in so many different directions. Even a member of our board was like, he asked in a meeting the other day, wait, what kind of Zen center is this? They were even talking about a 501c4 to endorse political candidates. So that kind of, the kind of fear that comes up is like, okay, that's just part of what's happening now. That's part of what's happening now. I don't know what this Zen center is going to look like even next year. But what I do know, just for the record, what I don't think will ever change. This is, get ready for it. Zazen. It may take different shapes, because different bodies. And I don't know, some of you had your camera off, and I even said, if you're lying down, beautiful. I had maybe my first insight when I had to do lying down meditation. I was not in full lotus position. I don't know, Liēn, if you were there at Tassajara at that time when I was injured. And so my showing up wholeheartedly looked like lying down on my cushion. And that was the first time I really felt like I connected with shikantaza as not about control, not about getting into a posture of full lotus, and not moving, but rather about relaxing into a kind of, it's not even trust, it's just a kind of naturalness. It's a kind of acceptance of, this is how it is. This is just simply how it is right now. Now, where do we go? Keiryū, I might have just taken it in a whole different direction. There may be people here who wanted to respond. Thank you. There may be people who want to respond to what you said, or maybe I took it in a place that someone else might want to respond to that. Any last thought from anybody? Anybody leaning toward your mute button, your unmute button? I'm scanning. It's just good to see all your faces and your names. Yeah.
I'd just say thank you for sharing honestly what is going on for you and what's going on there. It gives us a bigger picture. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Yes, Peter.
Yeah, I really appreciated when you talked about confusion, because that seems to be a majority of my life as well. Just a lot of doubt and confusion, and um, being able to acknowledge that I don't know a lot of the times uh, is gives me a little more room to explore and to make mistakes, and to not get boxed into very rigid ways of thinking and habits that I've cultivated for a long time. So thank you.
Peter, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, we know that doubt is one of the 5 hindrances traditionally, but only corrosive doubt, because just like anything else, a bodhisattva sees everything as practice. So the practice of doubt is, there's something that's always made me squeamish about a convert. I think there's a healthy skepticism that can allow us to investigate further. Doubt, the awakened form of doubt, causes us to just go deeper, to not just live on the surface. So even in our confusion, what is the teaching of confusion? What's the opportunity? What's the offering of confusion? What can I open to in this moment of confusion? I mean, for me as a white person, it is an opportunity to touch humility, to feel humble. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate, letting go of the teacher role, the vertical. Like, come on, people, teacher. The one thing that I loved about Zen from the very beginning is even the teachers are continuing to study. Absolutely. That's what we're doing in this practice when we sit on our cushion. I say that in Zazen, we're both, what do I say? We're both the scientist and the lab rat. We are, and I was thinking this actually in Zazen tonight with you guys. I was thinking, oh, this is so interesting. Zazen, this non-dual practice, it's the dance of subject and object. Maybe this is obvious to you guys, but there was something about that, because that could also be seen as confusing, of, oh, where am I in this? In Zazen, through our posture, there is a sturdiness to that, a kind of embodied confidence that has nothing to do with knowing anything here. So even in the midst of my confusion, I can still have a sense of that. And I'm right here. Just like that difficult conversation, even when it was difficult on Friday, I was like, I am right here for this. I'm terrified. And we both checked our breath a couple times, like, where is it? And then throughout the weekend, yeah, I feel really awful, and I'm here and I'm noticing I'm feeling really awful. Let's see what Monday holds. And I resisted the temptation to start texting my friend. I decided to give it some space and trust the process, trust time, not trying to, and also to check my inclination. Maybe it's a white thing to try to control, to try to put a spin on it, to try to fix something, just to give it some space and see what would happen and be ready for it all. And I feel really grateful again for the traction that we found, she and I. And I do feel that this kind of relationship, as we keep going, maybe we'll go viral in our sangha. It'll be a way to express how we can be with each other in truth and vulnerability. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.